Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm here with Rebecca Davis, SBCT SAFE Fellow, Principal Consultant, and member of the SAFE Framework team. And we're really excited to be here in Denver, Colorado on the last official day, I'd say, of the SAFE Summit. And it's been an awesome couple of days. And you've just come out of a workshop. So I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat. How's your experience of SAFE Summit been this year, back in person?
I don't know. All of it blew my mind, honestly, because everyone, just being able to see everybody again. And this is my first SAFE Summit working for SAFE instead of being a customer. So it just really blew my mind talking to people from all different countries, from all over the world, who are honestly like just so excited to just talk to each other and see each other and talk about what's been going on the last few years and all of the stories. And honestly, like I had people come up to me like in tears because they were so excited, which is just really big and deep. So yeah, my mind is still blown. I think I need it like the weekend to just like take it all in because it was incredible and so cool. And we have the biggest, awesomest, most cool community of people who are inspiring and trying to change the world, which is, I don't know, what else could you ask for?
Yeah,
right?
For sure. There was definitely heaps of energy in the room and you could tell everyone was super excited to be there.
Yeah.
And, like, we came a long way, obviously, but like it was so nice to be greeted by that kind of energy and like to get hugs from people and meet people face to face that you'd only ever seen on a screen before, yourself included.
Yeah.
So yeah,
we're all real people. We're both short.
Yeah. So good when we got to okay. I got you.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. And did you like it?
Oh, I think because this was my first SAFE Summit in person, so I attended the one virtually.
Yeah.
And that was really good. It was really good content and everything, but it's just different. It's not the same. Like when you sit down and talk and get to talk and have a conversation with the person sat next to you. You just don't get that online. Mm-hmm. So it was the really good content. That was another thing. Really good content still. Like there were so many talks happening that were almost at the same time. You wanted to be in two places at once, but thankfully they'll all be available. So that's awesome. And just like everything ran super smooth and having good conversations with other vendors all over the world because we don't get to do that very often. Being from Australia. Yeah. So that was really, really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So they did that thing where they said, like, if you traveled more than X hours.
We were the last one clapping.
Wow.
Yeah. So it'll be like a full day for us to get back home, but it's totally been worth it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I don't think we felt the jet lag because we just were swept up in all that energy that was happening. Day. So we started off with Partner Day on the first day, then obviously the 2 days of conference. And now I'm just super happy to be sat here with you and just going, wow, that was an awesome couple of days.
So much. so much like stuff. Yeah. What was your favorite?
Yeah. So I'm a bit of a data nerd. And my favorite has definitely been the flow metrics and accelerating flow, which I know, you also are excited about. So I think because there was some super cool stuff that were introduced while we've been at the SAFE Summit, but I guess one thing that excited me about talking about flow was that it folded in the team as well, and it kind of just supersized what SAFE tells us anyway. So we always knew that business agility would help to compete and thrive in the digital age. But, Dean's take-home message was we have to adapt faster. Yeah. And I guess the thing with that is like so much of the world has changed in the past couple of years. And you do feel like, how do we keep up? Like, how do we keep up with all of these changes and still maintain those values that we want to, where we can deliver value, we can do that sustainably, and as you are an advocate for, enjoy the work that we're doing. Yes. So, and like the thing is, he's like, what's flow? Like flow seems such a nebulous concept. Yeah. But, I've heard a lot as well, and maybe this is something you can elaborate on and unpack, like this whole thing of moving away from a traditional way of working, moving from a project to a product mindset. Yeah. And when my understanding of flow and having that mindset is they're kind of talking to the same thing. One begets the other. Yeah. But what is that mindset and what does that mean?
Yeah. So this is really top of mind for me right now because just like you said, it just literally like an hour ago ended a flow workshop that we're just testing and trying out. And this is one of the pieces we talked about with a bunch of really excited people, was how do you build that flow mindset and what is that flow mindset? So, I mean, for me, it's really helping everybody in the company, whether you're at the team level or train level or solution level or portfolio level or the executive team, understand and really live that there's all like the stuff that you could be doing at any given time. Like there's the stuff that you could be doing because somebody's really loud about it, or because I don't know, then the next person is saying like, this is a cool thing we need to start. But the thing that brings like the most joy and energy from the entire system is really like removing blockers, trying to get rid of the stuff that's inside of your company that isn't necessarily about like launching your next team or your train or doing the right agile things, but is like their corporate way of being, like corporate policies or historical ways of doing things, and old ways of doing metrics and like using them maybe as like punitive measures instead of as positives.
Yeah.
All of that is like, let's shift that to really thinking about how do we make all of that something that really improves us, improves our outcomes, improves the way we work together. And it takes everybody, right? Like, so there's things that you can do at the team level to really say like, hey, we're not really getting enough time. We talked about time and zone as one of the accelerators for flow. So finding out, like asking people, just asking, like, what does time and zone mean to you? Because it could mean something very different to you than it does mean to me. And figuring out how to get more of it, and make our batch sizes smaller. We might have already done a little bit, but we haven't done enough. And just really accelerating the way we get feedback, who we get feedback from, how to think about feedback. So I think the mindset's pretty big, honestly. Yeah. And what I love about what we've just released and what we just put out this week is just giving ways to communicate about it.
Yeah.
And ask questions and really have things to think about and have ways to start the conversation. Moving to that next step of really, if you look at that original implementation roadmap, like getting to accelerate, getting to really grow and achieve after you've done all the first things in the roadmap.
Yeah. And I think that's what I really liked about it as well, is because it was really clear, like, oh, these are the ingredients that can help improve flow. I think Andrew Sales, he referred to them as levers you can pull to help the flow go through the system.
Yeah.
And like, but they're tangible levers. Like it's not just this thing like flow, you know, it's like you can do this or look at this, and this. And if they're not going well, if they're not cranking, these are the metrics that are going to kind of raise a flag and for you to look at. But I really like what you said there about metrics not being used as a punitive measure.
Yeah. Because
when we have KPIs, OKRs, KRs, whatever acronym you want to use, usually it's like, this is the thing you've got to hit and this is what your success is being measured on.
Right.
And like flipping that on its head, this is more like looking at, this is how we know if the work is going through the system well and it's working well.
Yeah.
But like, how do you know? Because one of the questions that I had for you actually was, how often do you look at those things to see what's going on? Because SAFE often tells us things on a regular cadence. Like we do our PI planning, our inspect and adapt. Like we've got these ceremonies and these things that help us to build this rhythm. Yeah. How do we look to those accelerators, or how often do we look to those accelerators to see if flow is flowing?
Right. Yeah, I actually, somebody asked me this today, actually a few hours ago, because they're saying, the way that they had phrased it is like, okay, so I've come up with like what the things are I should do about this. How often do I check in? Should I check in on every iteration boundary? Should I check in every 3 weeks to see if things are actually flowing better? And the answer is really, for me at least, when you identify things to do. So you're looking at the flow accelerators and you're saying like, okay, I've talked about them, I've asked questions about them, I've thought about why they matter to me, and I've identified a few things that we could do about it. You also have to say like, when I decided the thing I'm going to do about it is X, Y, or Z, I believe that if I do this, so build a hypothesis, I believe if I do this, X, Y, or Z will then happen and things will be better. I think part of that, my water's just going everywhere, sorry.
Just what you do that, I'll just fix this.
I think part of that, that discussion and being able to say, like, okay, when do I check in? Is when you build a hypothesis, really considering what's the earliest moment that I can look back and see that something's changed. And that's going to take talking with the people. So if I'm asking you to change, I'm also going to ask you, like, what's the earliest moment that I could check back in? Mm-hmm. And for some of those actions, it might be the next day even. Some of those actions, it's going to take a little bit because the action might be really big. So I think that's part of like thinking about it, is saying, what's my hypothesis? What do I believe is going to come out of it? When's the earliest moment I can check in to see if flow is really moving in a different way than it was before, and be intentional about that. So I don't think there's like a golden answer, like do it this way. I think it does require thought. Yeah. And this is one of those moments where, in the case of, if you guys read the articles, the 8th Flow Accelerator is really like removing your company, like, yuck, right? So like policies, practices that were there before. Yeah. We word it in a different way, but it really is. It's about moving your company, like things that just aren't making sense. And in those cases, they're going to be super easy to identify, but it's going to take a little bit longer to go like meet the people you need to meet to really fix them and make a difference happen. So you just got to ask the question and really, really think hard about it.
And have a conversation, right? Like,
I just do it in a box and don't talk to anybody.
That's the thing. And I reading through those accelerators and like having time in the zone and being able to let go of legacy policies and procedures, I feel like COVID has been a forcing function for those two things particularly. Yeah. Because like moving to remote or hybrid, well, those meetings may not work anymore because we can't do them either, in person, or, having an hour and a half on Zoom is just too much. The format doesn't work anymore. Yeah. So I feel like when I was hearing those back, I'm like, yeah, we've kind of had to face those head on the past couple of years, and learnt the hard way. But, I think being agile is, with retrospectives, for example, you look back and you look at what's working, what's not. And I feel like that's a good space to have those types of conversations as well. Yeah. What I really liked about this was, like, as an individual, you can look at that and go, how am I empowered to be able to help flow? And knowing myself, like moving to remote work, having, time in your calendar where you've got for your deep work. And at the end of the week, when you feel like you've been productive on the things that matter to you and that you feel like you're adding value to and add value to the business, hey, you feel good. Yeah. And like, that's just such a simple thing. And it was so great to see that as one of the things that's connected to delivering value.
Well, and it's connected directly to happiness. I mean, you just said it, like when I can go back and I can actually like get the time I need to do my deep thought, I feel better. I'm happier. And it gets those moments where, like, your family comes in and they're like, hey, it's dinner time. And you're like, but this is so cool. Like, I'm having such a good time doing my work. Yeah. So it does bring joy. And I think it's different for different situations and different teams. So we always have to ask. Because I think before I joined SAFE, I would have said my time in zone was generally my non-meeting time. Right? Yeah. Anytime I got to like not be in a meeting and go do something that was an action from a meeting before, I got that time. But honestly, since joining the framework team, my time in zone is every time I get to spend with the guys. Because we're co-pairing, we're co-writing, we're so excited, we're sharing all of our brainstorm, we're sharing everything we learn. And like, I don't ever want to leave that. Yeah. And that's, so my time in zone is technically a meeting. Yeah. But like, for me, it's like just empowering and amazing collaborative time. Yeah. So I think we had to ask each other, like, what does it mean to you? And why does it mean that? And instead of saying, oh, we're just going to get rid of all meetings, right? Because some things are not meetings, they're interactions and they're collaborations. And then some things are meetings and like they're, So you just have to figure that out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Andrew said, like, unless somebody is adding value to that meeting or a decision's being made in that meeting, like, is there another way we can do that? And now we've got so many tools at our disposal to do all these different things. Right. And like really questioning what the value is of having a meeting. And I think you've hit it on the head. It's the collaboration and communication and being able to pair on stuff and the fun. Because from the past couple of days, being in person is kind of fun.
Yeah. Tiring, but really fun. Yeah.
But like there are 8 of them, right? So like where do where do you start? Is it top to bottom, or, you know, where do you start to have this kind of self-actualization of flow, or at least be one of that?
I mean, so I think what's cool about them is they do apply to each layer. And I think to me, like, you start with a blend, right? And so we do give out guidance about, like, hey, like, if you're a team level person, you might start here with these flow metrics and these flow accelerators. But honestly, I think the first thing to do is, like, read the articles and literally, like, understand them and then have a conversation about them.
Yeah.
And then self-select and say, like, hey, like, we believe that if we started concentrating on, like, this one, it would actually impact this one. And if we take these combined, like, it's going to solve more of our problems. But I do think it's conversational. So I definitely want to say, like, take all 8 things and Monday, just, like, go do every single one of them, because that's not a thing, right?
Yeah.
But I would say, like, Monday, like, read about it, really digest it with your teams and the people around you, whoever your teams are, whether you're executive team or whatever. Have that conversation, really try to, like, grok it and understand. I don't know if grok's a word for everybody in the world, but it basically means, like, understand deeply.
Yeah.
So really consider and have a conversation about, like, which ones do you want to take first?
Yeah. Because
they're all super cool and they do all impact each other.
Yeah.
So fixing one thing is actually going to impact other items.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, this is one of those things. It does take brain power. There is no magic answer. There is no step 1 and then step 2. From a point of view of, like, when do I start looking at them? I do think that if you don't yet have a value stream map, like, you don't understand where your pieces are, like, what the steps are to delivering flow to begin with, you should probably start there.
Yeah.
Because if you can't see that, or if you can't talk about it, and you don't know, like, what these steps are. And I do know that there are a lot of companies out there that just never did value stream identification. They just started launching trains.
Yeah.
Or they never did value stream mapping after they did identification. So they're not really sure, like, what their flow map is. I would start there. And then I would say, okay, now let's try to understand it. Let's try to accelerate it.
Yeah. And I think reading through them as well, like, if you are experiencing a sticking point, like, if there is a point of friction in the flow of work in your team or your art or a bigger level, you know, reading through them, like, ooh, that one kind of feels a little, you know, like, so how
some of them tug at your heart a little bit more.
Feels like, ooh, like, I was reading through them, and I can see how, like, even us at Easy Agile, you know, we did our version of PI planning. And one of the real messages that we were getting from our leadership team was, don't overcommit. And so when I was reading through, I'm like, yes, reduce queue length. Don't take too much into the PI, because that was choking us from being able to move things around, and we're just pinned against the wall with all the things we said we were going to do. And so, like, reading through that, you know, you kind of go, oh, that's been an area we've improved. Reading through other things, you're like, yeah, there's probably still some work to do there. So, you know, the people on the ground doing the work, planning the work, probably the ones who can feel where the improvement can be made.
Well, you know what's so cool to me, like, this whole week is all the customer stories. So we have, like, something called the main stage, where the big customer stories talk. And they all had very senior leaders in them. Yeah. And they're all insanely authentic and transparent about, like, look, this is not just, like, teams need to fix their stuff. We, as senior leaders, as executives, we have things to fix. Yeah. And that's why I love the Flow Accelerators so much, is, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you always have something. You are never perfect. Yeah. And being able to have the conversation about, like, hey, I'm actually an executive who's having a conversation about, do we have the right policies and procedures in place? Do we have the right blend of strategy going through our system? Are we, as the executive team, are we decreasing the work in process for the rest of the organization? That's so key. And hearing the stories, it's not like we actually planned what all those execs would say. They all said, we owe this to our companies. Like, we owe giving the people who work here shorter queues, and trusting them to build the right thing at the right moment, and trusting them to every single one of them, I think said, like, we need that innovation time. Yeah. We got to build that innovation. It's sacred. We've got to protect it. Yeah. Which is so cool.
So cool. And I think it kind of goes, that faster feedback idea is, you know, equally getting feedback from the stakeholders, from the customers, but teams being able to provide that feedback to their leadership team because it needs to be able to go both ways. And as you've just said, and that I really enjoyed that part of that as well, the talks. They just got up there. And what I loved, and they said, we didn't know what was going to happen next.
Yeah.
And we failed at that bit, but then we got up, and exactly what you were talking about in your talk yesterday, like getting back up.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool to have people be honest about that and say it wasn't a smooth process, because often if there's a sense of if it goes wrong or if it falls over, it didn't work.
Yeah.
You know, and if it didn't work once or twice, like you can give up.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to have them show their success, but then also all those potholes and deviations and forks in the road along the way, and being really honest about that.
Yeah.
That was really cool, because that's because you got a lot of people in the room, and I sat next to a couple like, oh, you know, there's one person in my leadership team, they're not really on board, or like there's some people who are really holding on to this particular way of working. So these are common challenges.
Right.
So to be able to hear how they've been overcome, that was really cool.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And nothing we do in this, I don't know, to me, everybody who's doing Agile these days, they're really trying to help this insanely complicated like relationships and the systems be easier, and none of that is easy. But there's a whole group of like these amazing people trying it. And so learning from each other and listening to those stories. And even today in the workshop, we're like, look, we're all figuring this out, right? We all need to be better at like identifying these pieces, not doing the next burning bridge. So like, let's just share. And that's the neatest thing, is like having this community of Agilists around the world from everywhere who do honestly have very similar problems that are tough, that are personal, that are require heart and require courage and require bravery. And it's just all help each other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's really cool.
And the fact that what was so good about the summit being back in person as well was that it was the conversation you had with the person next to you over coffee, because where would you even go out to seek somebody to say, I don't know you, but I'm in this role at this organization. We're going through this. Have you gone through that? Like what? And like to get time in someone's calendar, like all these challenges to have just had that same conversation. If it weren't for the fact that everyone was in person and could just strike up a conversation, like, and that's what was really cool too. Like the people that were in the room, it was a mix of roles of people who are those leaders as well. And it was great to see them showing up and being interested in SAFE, and I think indicating their commitment to being able to change the way their organization works.
Yeah, it is amazing. So, I mean, there were a couple of times where somebody in a room would be like, I just wish, like, they would say, like, they, the executives, they.
Those.
And then someone would be like, well, I'm an executive.
Yeah.
I'm the they. What do you want to say? Like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really neat. Anyway.
Well, I think as well, one like question that I have on all of this though, and I hope the leaders that were present take it away when it comes to all that has been discussed, is not using those flow metrics as a means to, you know, hold people account. How can you see that happening, or how do you address that risk?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it takes trust both ways, and you don't automatically just get trust, right? But you can give trust.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a bit of like teams and trains, and honestly like Agilists around the world deciding to give a little trust to leaders, because leaders are trying very hard right now to be more human, to be more kind, all those things. So I think it does require a little bit of a give too, saying like, hey, I'm gonna see if we can like talk about measurements, talk about the outcomes we're actually trying to achieve because of those measurements, talk about suggestions that we have, and then give trust that like that's what we're all going to try to march forward with. And what one of the customers talked about is like when things get really hard is when it's super easy for leaders to go back to behaviors that they had before. Yeah. Because it's tough and they like, you know. Yeah. So accepting that, actually I think two different people today were like, look, leaders are human too. And they are. So giving that ability to say like, hey, you are also a human. This is very tough. It's tough for all of us. Yeah. Let's go back. Like we talked about like what outcomes we were trying to get to in a positive way. So being just really honestly courageous about if things are starting to be used in a negative way, bringing back up the root of why we started to use it to begin with. And then I think there's a bit of why is our measurement there? I was in one talk where, or like a conversation, it was more like a feedback conversation. And there was a company lace leader who said, like, look, one of the things that we really measure is, as part of our transformation measures, is cost per story point. And there's another leader who said, how dare you?
Yeah, wow.
So someone raised their hand and was like, how dare you? That's such a negative thing. And she's like, it is not a negative thing. The reason that we use cost per story point is we're able to then talk to our executives about, hey, we haven't been prioritizing tech debt and enablers, and our cost per story point is going up because of it.
Okay.
And so this is not a team problem. This is a leadership problem. So we use cost per story point to help our leaders understand why it is that we must prioritize the things we do. And the other person was like, oh, okay. So I think it's also like asking, like, why do you want this? And not just automatically assuming that somebody wants a measure because they're automatically just out to get you, right? Mm-hmm. Some people are actually using them for good out there. Mm-hmm. Actually, a lot are, like, more and more every day. So why do you want to use it? What are we using it for? How are we using it in a way to improve our customer outcomes, our user outcomes? And if we're not using it for that, we're just measuring for the sake of measurement, like, why should we be doing that?
Yeah. And that's maybe a policy or procedure we should.
Right?
So all comes back. No, that's really insightful. And I think as well, like, these things can sometimes be the tools that we need to have the conversation. What I really like there kind of reminded me of something you shared in your talk yesterday, where you're getting that resistance to something, being curious and approaching that with curiosity and asking questions.
Yeah.
And look at that, just unpacked the reason behind that initial resistance to using, cost per story point.
Yeah.
But it's been an awesome couple of days. We'll count down the days till the next one. Yeah. But for now, it's probably time to get a good 365 Nashville. All right, let's get our tickets going.
I'll be there.
But now it's probably time for a really good rest, and I really appreciate you having a chat with us on all things that have been the past 4 days.
Honestly, a great way to end my Summit experience.
Oh, so glad to hear that. Yeah. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, good to see you.
You too.